hello, and hello once again, all friends and newcomers. And welcome back to the next episode of Kamaitachi no Yoru. I am, as ever, Mitsuru Madoi, a humble forensic scientist. And we are at quite a sizable crossroads, as you might be able to tell from what we're looking at today. Heyo! Good God, look at this thing. There's so much area just on each side. How's your day been, Doctor? Hello, Okio P. Welcome to the stream. I appreciate you showing up. And hello again, Otome. My day has been. It has in fact been. What is this game about? Oh, goodness me. You may have picked a bad time to show up, Okio. This is Kamaitachi no Yoru, Night of the Kamaitachi Rebirth. It is a remake of an extremely influential murder mystery video game originally released for the SNES by a pre-merger with Spike Chunsoft. And it was quite popular, quite influential. That's when I left a cliffhanger on how the day has been. Yeah, I do have a gimmick to maintain at this point. But more importantly, it's a game with a lot of content in it. If you'll allow us to look over here at the play log, this game contains 47 endings. That is fairly confusing for us, because as it happens, last stream we did successfully identify the culprit and all of the tricks behind them. So now we find ourselves needing to ask, where do we fill all the space over here and over here with? So we find ourselves faced with a few options we could go down. The last stream, upon completing our 3, I guess you would call them true endings, we did unlock a follow-up ending to this one here, Mari's detective story. We also unlocked this area over here, a completely disconnected storyline, a novel, which is just way off to the side here, and I don't know what it means. And we were also told that we may have unlocked additional stuff within the game, which seems to be like the only place they could hide stuff. There were an awful lot of unused... I think they said the A novels, the Ryukishio 7 story. I said I thought that at the time, but I checked VNDB right before we started streaming. I think he might have written a different section. So I'd think twice before listening to anything I say, really. Don't know what any of you know. The game lied. No, I lied. I'm a detective, I do that sometimes. You should probably get used to it. Anyway, so the question we now have to answer is, what exactly do we do? Would we like to go on the side bit? Do we want to follow up on Mari's detective story before we forget that it exists? Or do we want to hit start, go in from the beginning and see if we can't break anything new? Anything could lead us somewhere, anything could tell us something new. Let's break something new for the sake of it. We want to start a Otome. Otome voted for us to start a new playthrough. I hope we can do the A novel today, though. If we actually do find anything new here, I wouldn't hold my breath. You still wanna commit to the bit, as they say in the biz. The business. Business! Mankind was my business. The common good of the... I haven't read A Christmas Carol since I was in college, I'm sorry. Okay. So, this is Night of the Kamaitachi. Okyo, if you're still here, this probably isn't going to make all that much sense to you. I'm sorry. After getting the hang of snowplowing, I finally made it to the bottom of the slope and stopped for a much-needed breather. Mari, meanwhile, whooshed effortlessly to a stop in front of me, her fancy footwork kicking up a tidal wave of white powder. The goggles were now covered with snow. Couldn't see shit, Captain. Thought we would fast skip. We could. I was a bit concerned because there are newcomers in the chat, but I suppose when we get to the breakages, we're, probably not gonna make any sense for them anyway. Anyway, didn't even ask if we wanted to build that snowman, honestly, how rude can a woman get? Mari's laughter rang out through the wintry air. I peeled off my now useless goggles, began brushing the snow from my jacket. Oh goodness me, we already have a new branch. Neither of these map, if my memory serves, and it usually does, neither of these dialogue options map to what we said last time we were in. So, do I wanna... Where do I wanna go from here? I guess we'll be nice for now if this doesn't get us anything like in the back. Go back and pick from the flowchart. Chunk. She's cute. She is many things. Actually, I think this might actually have been the dialogue you were supposed to go on. Flowcharts. Yep, new option, but we went back on track. I guess Asai isn't here, we can stick around for a bit longer. Get our introductions to our heroine. Mari took off her goggles and flashed me a grin. Man, that smile. That's where it all began. I hadn't seen those pearly whites for a few hours now, but they were like the sun peeking out from behind the clouds. I couldn't help staring at her for a while. Mari's long black hair contrasted beautifully against her pure white ski suits. She'd been the center of everyone's attention as she glided down even the toughest of slopes with practiced ease. I was sure they must have been dying to know if there was a beautiful face hiding behind those ski goggles of hers. I mean, it was just the sort of thing you did at a ski resort. You know, like how you ogle bikini. There we go. There we go. And they totally ruined my joke, too. If that were true, I thought... If that were true, then I doubted anyone had been left disappointed by the big reveal. Mari had practically grown up in Snow Country, so even though I'd been discouraged before by how much better she was at this stuff than me, I now felt only pride. Not only did I know what her face looked like under those goggles, but I could also attest to what gorgeous curve it had under that ski suit of hers. Yes, unlike Mario, Toad is not Suki. Haha, Thorn Pawns, there was more than a touch of exhaustion in my voice. After a long day spent earning my stripes out on the slopes, I could barely stand upright.
いいじゃない。ね、あと1回だけ。
Mari clasped her hands out in front of begging me. And yep, here we go. Do we want a break here? It would be new content. Yeah, sure, let's go.
じゃああと1回だけだよ。
I reluctantly agreed, unable to resist the look she was giving me.
そうこなくちゃ。
And I can't believe Mari got us to cave. Maybe this will end with us getting trapped in a cave. Beginning of a million fanfics. New content. New content. New content. New content. New content. New Hi, Nia. Mari laughed and skied over to the chairlift. Maybe I should have said no after all. Ow. God, you know, every time you do that, my neck cracks a little louder. Trapped in a cave with a bunch of strangers, then a murder happens. Well, I mean, if they manage to make it to the top of the ski lift without either of them getting bumped off, they'll have beaten the last two guys I saw on here. Here being, like, just ski mountains in general, not this specific. Will you stop that? You bloody conformist. Maybe I should have said no after all. Already beginning to regret my decision, I dragged myself after her. When we got off at the top, Mari recently upped the ante.
最後だからもうちょっと上まで登りましょうよ。
Mari, you're reaching too close to the sun, your wings are going to melt. BTW meets, I'm going to do a Jinx from League cosplay. Yes, I saw that, Nia. You did post your whole shopping list on the Discord. I know, I was there at the time. Nande?
トールも初心者コース飽きたでしょ？
I don't trust any man who's bored of bunnies, let me tell you.
でもまだ暴言だってまともにできないのに。
大丈夫。無理だと思ったら転べばいいんだから。
Of course. If you don't think you can handle it, just break your own leg and then we won't be able to force you to do anything to it. It's genius, Mari. I can see no possible way this story could end poorly. We're going to get a bad ending? I mean, anything's possible. Yes, truly the size of Nia's brain leaves us all in awe. Mostly because we're not sure how they managed to fill that much space with not much stuff, but League. Whatever the case, yeah, sure, let's see how quickly this kills us. Maybe it'll be fun.
わかった。行こう。
Ouch. I didn't want to look like a coward, so I decided to give it a shot. By the time we got off at the next stop, the sun had already set, and the slopes were nearly empty. The wind, meanwhile, seemed to have suddenly grown colder. From down below, the slope hadn't looked nearly as steep. Although I'd taken the lift up here, I wasn't confident I could manage to ski all the way back down. Maybe I could think of an excuse to take the return trip on the lift? Like a sprained ankle or a broken binding or something?
いい？じゃあ行くわよ。
I regret nothing. Mari seemed blissfully unaware of my inner monologue. Good old Toru does not go to the Phoenix Wright School of projecting your thoughts outside all the rest of the characters.
中級者コースってのはやっぱりまだ早かったんじゃないかな。
I struggled to keep her from hearing the quaver in my voice.
何言ってんの。大丈夫大丈夫。朝からずっと特訓してたんだから、これくらいもう滑れるわよ。
At least someone here has faith in us. Mari laughed and thumped me on the back. I felt my body begin to glide forward down the slope. Before I could put my poles and stop myself, I was off and running.
体重は前にかけるのよ。
I heard Mari's voice coming from somewhere behind me. My skis seemed to be moving downhill of their own accord. I felt less like skiing and more like a barely controlled freefall, and I was falling faster every second. Mari pulled up alongside me and started shouting out advice.
暴言忘れちゃダメよ。もっとスピード落として。
Guys, come on, zigzag! Zigzag! It makes you harder to hit! Yeah, I knew that. At least my brain did. The rest of my body was quite cooperating. I kept gliding faster and faster, almost like I was flying the air. Turning was no longer a valuable option. I bailed, falling down into the snow just as Mari had suggested. But I was going too fast. I tumbled down the slope before finally coming to a stop, buried entirely in snow.
大丈夫？
Man, skiing accidents are no laughing matter. You could break like any or every bone in your body if you hit the ground at a high enough speed. Mari kicked up more snow as she slid to a stop right in front of me.
ああ、なんてことないよ。
Alright, as long as our brain cap isn't filled with blood, we should be okay in that case. As the snow broke our fall, I put on a brave face and tried to push myself up from the ground. Never mind. If Toru died, does this count as murder by suggestion? I think it counts as just incompetence. Total baseline incompetence. A sharp pain shot through my left ankle. When I looked down, I saw that my right boot had come free of its binding during the crash as designed, but the left had stayed stubbornly attached. Because of that, only my left leg seems to have gotten twisted up. She peer pressured him into doing something she knew would kill him. I mean, she didn't know. Obviously, she couldn't have known because it didn't happen. Besides which, worst case scenario would just be like, if we actually did die, who would say it was her idea? My ghost? A spooky spirit? Probably not.
じっとしてて。
Mari knelt down, slipped off my boot, and cautiously probed at my ankle.
骨折はしてないと思うけど、まだ近いからリフトまで戻った方が安心ね。
ごめん。
ううん。私が無理に連れてきたんだから、私の方が謝らなくっちゃ。
By the time Mari got me to my feet, a resort paramedic came skiing over to help us out. Next stop, the first aid station, where they determined I'd only suffered a bad sprain, thank God. They rushed my ankle in bandages and sent us on our way. And Mari didn't even offer that little healing spell she gave us. Come on. Okay, sure, so maybe this time we didn't save you from a murderer. But, you know... Just a little respect would be appreciated. Hmm. By the time we reached the parking lot, it was completely dark and starting to snow.
運転できる？
Mari seemed concerned.
ちょっと無理みたいだな。マリー、免許持ってたよな。
うん、一応。
She theoretically has a driver's license. As opposed to having a theoretical driver's license. Her reply didn't exactly fill me with confidence, but what else could I do? We attached our skis to the roof of our four-wheel drive SUV. Okay, you can tell this is a remake of a game made in the 80s because they're able to afford this on a college student's salary. And drive it around without it implying anything about their characters. Then I slipped into the passenger side while Mari positioned herself behind the wheel. I wonder what this will lead into. Well, if our foot is broken, we won't be able to go in and investigate crime scenes. Probably have to talk to people a lot more. Without having the emotional drive to run around and protect Mari from the culprit physically. Just in case, I made sure my seatbelt was securely fastened. The engine roared to life. Mari waited a minute for the vehicle to warm up, then shifted into gear. My god, new CGs. Vroom vroom. And a beep beep as well. Beep beep, I'm a ski lift. When I glanced over, I could see Mari stiff. She seemed nervous.
落ち着いて運転すれば大丈夫さ。
今話しかけないで。
Don't talk to her before she's had her driving. Or her coffee. Or her gaming. Correction, Mari seemed very nervous. As we got farther and farther from the slopes, the streetlights dwindled and the storm began to worsen. Our wipers tried their hardest, but the snow kept piling up on the windshield. The narrow road we traveled was flanked on either side by deep drifts and thick forest. Night had fallen. When we'd driven to the slopes that morning, we had the advantage of daylight and clear weather, so it would only take us 15 minutes. But the way things were looking now, the drive back might take us twice as long. Chat, can you tell us how long that is? Mark kept a death grip on the steering wheel the entire time, glaring out through the glass. Dummy dummy, so I can't. Yeah, I did figure. I slammed on the brakes as something suddenly darted through our high beams. She spun the wheel wildly, sending our car careening off the road and into a snowbank. Here's the answer, Doctor. I can't tell if you're being serious right now. My heart skipped a beat as the seatbelt bit into my shoulder. Why, oh why did they install teeth on it? Neither of us could speak for a moment.
ごめんなさい。でも今の何だったのかしら。
イタチか何かだよ。それより車は動く。
It looked like an Itachi, if you say. The engine had stopped. Mari desperately attempted to get it started again. But no matter how much he cranked the ignition, it refused to catch. I'm not exactly an expert on cars, but it sounds like something sort of came loose. Sort of heard the sound that sounds like a belt flapping around. The very end of that sound clip there.
なんてこった。
And the guy goes, God damn it! And he pounds on the table, silverware goes flying everywhere, and it was fantastic. The word just sort of slipped out of me.
どうしよう。
Mari looked like she was about to burst into tears. I couldn't let her see that I was scared too. So I forced myself to sound optimistic.
仕方ないよ。歩いて行こう。途中に家があるかもしれないし、車で通りかかる人だっているだろう。
このまま行った方が良くない？この雪じゃ道に迷うかもしれないし、そうでなくても投資しちゃいそう。
You raise a compelling argument, but also please consider...
エンジンがかからないんじゃ、ここにいたって投資しちゃうよ。
That's actually a fairly decent counter-argument. Mari bit her lip in frustration. But as the car kept growing colder, she soon came around to my way of thinking.
そうね。じゃあ、一刻も早く出発しましょう。
We pulled our ski gloves back on, zipped up our jackets, and got out of the car. Fortunately, the SUV had come equipped with a flashlight for just such an emergency. The blizzard started slashing at us the second we stepped outside. Without discussing it, Mari and I joined hands and started walking. God, another hand-holding stream. He was so perverted. The patch of ground illuminated by our flashlight was too small, too faint. As we walked, the shrieking wind shook the trees all around us, freezing my exposed ears and nose. The painfully cold air penetrated all the way into my lungs. My injured ankle was throbbing, but not so much that I couldn't walk.
ここ、どの辺なの？
Shouldn't you put on those goggles? That seems... reckless. Mari asks between labored breaths.
マリの方が詳しいんじゃないの？
この辺りを自分で運転するの初めてだから。
And honestly, what'll you do if your, like, eye jelly freezes in your sockets? I immediately began to feel less confident about our plan. Would we really be able to find the right path in this darkness? Fresh powder kept piling atop the older, more compacted snow. It crushed beneath our boots as we trudged onwards. This can't end with a bad ending, huh? It's pretty long. I imagine this is an entire separate branch over on the... Yeah, you see? Look at all this space off to the sides. I'm sure we'll see a branch at some point. There are no signs of life out in the darkness. Not even a single car. The apex predator of the natural world. The only sound was the howling of the wind. I didn't know what else to do, so I just kept moving forward. The snow was now ankle deep, and it was getting harder and harder to walk. It was piling on me. I could feel the weight of it slowing down my every step. So just twist your shoulders a little. What's the problem here?
見て、分かれ道があるわ。
Okay, I know I said branching path earlier, but I didn't think you'd mean it this literally. She was right. A crossroads came into view up ahead, illuminated by a circle of light. Maybe we'll meet Mastermind Jenny and she'll make sure no detectives can arrive at the scene. Someday we're going to find out why Jenny is narratively relevant to this game, I'm sure. I had noticed it while driving earlier.
どっちに行ったらいいのかしら。
Which way do we go, Yoru? Which way do we go? Mari seemed anxious.
なんかすごく迷いそうな気がするな。
I see Toru has been reading his genre-savvy guide for would-be detectives.
何よ、もうそんな。
Shot me a look.
いや、そう思っただけだよ。ああ、紙とペンがあればな。マッピングできたらとつくづく思うよ。
Gee, if only we had some sort of chart of all the directions we've tried already. No, too late now.
そういえば私も。今まではさっきまで何してたかしらって思い出すのがすごく簡単だったんだけど、もうできなくなるような気がするわ。
Oh. Well, that's unfortunate.
記憶の巻き戻しってやつだね。
そう、それができなくなるような。
Do you get it, chat? Do you understand what they're trying to convey? Are you picking up what they are putting down? But I wouldn't give for a pen and some paper. I'm not getting a pen and paper. I respect the environment too much. Like that fir tree. There was a thick fir tree at the center of the crossroads. A long branch extended like a bony finger toward one of the four roads. For the sake of convenience, I thought of that direction as north. The right road is east, the left road is west. We'd approached from the south. Alright, I have absolutely no leads. Chat, do you have any strong feelings about 3/4 of the compass directions? Because I would like to. What would I like to do? Suppose if we're going to go back and try this over and over until we get it, we could just go top to bottom. But Otome has put in a vote for West. I hear one vote for West. Do I hear an East? Do I hear a North? Would I like to go in a direction other than West? They are going once. Yeah, the East is a fantastic location, responsible for making many great mystery games. We could go up north, where it is even colder, which feels even more on brand. Going twice. And sold. We will be going west, young man. Meow. We went west. The farther west we went, the steeper the snow got. For long, it was up to my knees.
ねえ、トール。ここ、道じゃないんじゃない？これ以上先は進めないみたいよ。
I mean, we could always go further in this direction. I'm not a coward.
そうだね。戻ろう。
There was a thick fir tree at the center of... Alright, good talk, everybody. Heading west brought us to a dead end. I needed the content. I'm sorry, Mari. The completion screen does lists on a per text box basis. I don't look forward to going back to the culprit's name sections earlier and filling in the name of every single character in the game.
ごめん。
Immediately went back the way we came. It was a thick fir tree to do. Alright, if it's not west, then maybe it's west. I need to know. I need to know. Alright, I see how it is. Fine, I'll go east if it makes you so happy, Criminy. It went to the east. After a while, the northern road split again. One path continued straight forward, and the other veered to the north. If we go west, then east, aren't we going back this way we came? No, we came from the south. That was what they said. If you'll recall.
どっちだろ
熱いラーメンが食べたいわ。
I mean, honestly, so do I. Now his eyes were glazed over. Kat, what's your favorite type of ramen? I like it with just, like, salt, because I'm really boring that way, but, I've also had Hokkaido style, because, like, Hokkaido style ramen, like Sapporo style, that's really good, actually. Incredibly rich.
マリしっかりしろ
Get a hold of yourself, woman. Cannibalism is still illegal. We haven't gotten that overturned yet. As I shouted at her, Mari's eyes swam back into focus.
ごめんなさい。ついぼーっとしちゃって。
ペンションに戻ればあったかいものもあるよ
そうね。
I think culprits care about what's illegal.
さあ頑張っていこう
Not gonna respond to that, because I know there's people in chat who have not seen the culprit spoiler yet, and I like screwing with them. I decided we should. Alright, do we keep going the way we're going? Do we turn north? Or do we turn back around and try the northern branch of the first path? That's the plan. North, go north, go north. We went up to the north. With the icy winds blowing down the slope, I couldn't look up for more than a moment. My ears and cheeks felt frostbitten. Mari's teeth were chattering from the cold, but she didn't offer a word of complaint as we kept marching forward. The blizzard seemed to be picking up steam. Is that a mixed metaphor? I decided we should keep going north or go south down the hill. Down the hill. Is down the hill the way we want to go? We went south, down the hill. Jump down the hill and be over with it. Either way, we won't have to do this maze minigame anymore. Taking a walk, alone with Mare. There was a time not too long ago as I fell asleep in my lonely bed that I'd dream of such a thing. And the sound totally isn't annoying. What are you talking about, Atome? This is fine. Though at the time, I had no idea the circumstances would be so dire. Oh, to go back to those days. We arrived at a T-shaped junction where an east-west road met a sloping path from the north.
ラーメンが食べたい。
Mari's eyes were glazed over. I let her be for now and decided we should. I believe east. Yeah, go east! East! We have the utmost faith in you. As we kept traveling east, the tree branches stretched out over the road, creating an eerie sort of tunnel for us to travel through. Maybe it was the shelter those branches provided, but the wind and snow seemed to have eased. See, they even said eased. That's clearly proof we're going the right way. From time to time, I jumped as I heard a mound of snow fall from one of the trees overhead. The tunnel of trees curved sharply north. I decided we should Go north, go back west. Well, we shouldn't go back. I mean, obviously. Okay. So we can't look at the flowchart, but we can scroll back up our text save. So it's not we're totally lost. Never go back. Never go back. You can't turn back the clock. As we exited the tunnel, the wind and snow were even worse than before. Or maybe it just seemed that way since we've been walking in relative calm for so long. We instinctively huddled close together, trying to shield ourselves from the wind. Up where Mari was pointing, there was indeed a pond. It was frozen solid and blanketed in white. You can do some interesting things with a frozen pond if you have ill intentions. Let me tell you. I mean, that statement applies to, like, most things if you really think about it. God, you would not believe half the shit I have seen in my line of work. Apparently we wouldn't be going any further in this direction. I guess we are turning back. We both slumped our shoulders and went back the way we came. I like that lake. Let's look at that lake again. Mari's voice trembled as he complained. Alright, we turn alright. Fine, fine. God, you're so needy, but with your desire to not freeze to death. God. Back in my day, we had to freeze to death 5 times just to get to school. Uphill both ways. My hands were numb. At this point, the cold was even managed through my thick winter boots. I couldn't wait to get back to the lodge. That was my one driving thought. We arrived at T-shaped junction. Alright, we went east last time. Do we want to go... we're back at the ramen place. Let's go north again. We went up north. We're in the middle of a sloping road running from north to south. I decided we should go north. And went north. A dark black forest surrounded us on all sides. The feeble glow of our flashlight was all but useless in this blizzard. As we staggered uphill, I saw a side road branching east, while the main road continued up to the north. I worried we might never make it back to Spear Lodge. Plagued by doubt, I decided we should. Well, they said north was the main road. Then again, I doubt this ski lodge is out on the main road. What to do. I think we should go east. If and we'd all like to know. We went east. Eastman! Having come from the east to do battle with the amazing Rondo. There was a road heading west and a road leading up to the north. There appeared to be a shadowy forest to the south and a valley to the east, but between the darkness and the blizzard it was hard to tell for sure. Wondering if I might die out here, I decided we should. Well, we just came from the west, so we gotta keep going north. There was a road leading west, and another going into the south. To the north and east were valleys so deep they seemed bottomless. If we fell, we'd die, so I decided we should go west. There's a road leading east, another going down to the south. It was a struggle to even walk at this point. With each and every step, I had to pull my feet out of the shin-deep snow. I was sweating buckets, and all that sweat was immediately turning to ice. My body temperature was plummeting rapidly. I had to get somewhere warm soon. Very soon. Shivering there in the cold, I decided we should go down south. Okay, I'm pretty sure we just went in a circle. A road from the east joined a sloping road running from the north to the south. Where do I never make it back to the Spur Lodge? Right, we've tried going... Sloping road north to south. We might be close to the lodge now. No, we've definitely been here already. Go west, go up north, go east. We went east, the road heading west, and a road leading up to the north. Yep, this is definitely the same place. Alright, so this whole area was just a big cul-de-sac. If we go up north, we'll be back there again, so let's head down south. Where were we anymore? It didn't matter now. That's right. We're in the middle of a running road, no north to south, go down south. Alright, here's the ramen place again. Last time we were here, we went... It's in here somewhere. Last time we went north, did we do this before? No, this is the same comment as last time. We've gone east. We've gone... Mario, are you here? Gone north, so let's go west. South down the hill where she talks about ramen. Maybe she doesn't say anything, that means we went to the wrong place. I think there is an actual physical map we could draw here if we cared that much. Like up there, we went east, north, west, south, and that dropped us off back where we started. So there is properly Euclidean connections between places. Long branch extended like a bony finger. Oh god, we're here again. Alright, have we gone north here yet? Went north. After a while, the northern road split again. The path continuing straight quickly turned into a fairly steep climb, and the one going west looked to follow a more gentle slope. The Arctic winds blowing down from the mountain seemed intent on keeping us from advancing any further. Mari huddled up against me, shivering. I decided we should keep on going north. We took the steeper road to the north. Shielding our faces from the blizzard, we leaned into the wind as we climbed up the hill. The flashlight didn't even reach far enough for us to see where we'd be planting our feet next. I don't know, it doesn't look that dark. I mean, I can clearly look, I can see all the way over there. Top of that tree. This is nothing. Maybe you should just get a better flashlight, huh? Ever think of that? As I peered out through the darkness, I thought I saw something glimmering up ahead. Was I hallucinating? Just then, Mari started shouting. So we literally just had to go straight twice from the beginning. Great. Great, I love video games. So I wasn't hallucinating after all. She could see it too. I took a few steps forward, trying to get even a little closer. Suddenly, it was as if the ground had vanished beneath my feet. I would have tumbled off the cliff if Mari hadn't grabbed me by the arm. The road abruptly ended here.
そこに明かりが見えてるのに行けないなんて。
We do know the road is to the north. That's good knowledge. So if we just keep going straight north and just make sure every time we take a veer off to the side to avoid an obstacle, we rejoin the main path. We should be able to get there. Mari sounded frustrated, but there wasn't much we could do about it. We dragged ourselves back down the hill. Road north, road west. West, and next time we get a choice, we'll go east. Keep that in mind, keep that in mind. We have a system now. We can get through this, chat. As we traveled up the gentle slope, we saw what looked like a roof, poking out of the snow on the side of the road.
なんだろ
バスの待合所じゃないかしら。
They get bus service all the way out here. Man, Japan's public transport system is incredible.
う。なるほど。
なるほどね. It was almost entirely buried in snow. Given that we're in the middle of a raging blizzard, I doubted any buses would be running. Still, I cleared away some of the snow, trying to get a clue where we were. But to no avail.
行くしかないのか。
From here, the road curved to the north. If I stopped for even the briefest of moments, the falling snow would begin to pile up on my boots. The two of us were ready to collapse, cold and exhaustion. I decided we should keep going north. Kept going north. The slope was growing steeper, the blizzard fiercer. Mara, who'd walked so very far without complaint, seemed to have finally reached her limit.
トール、お願い、ちょっと休ませて。
Mari dropped to her knees in the snow, her fingers digging into my arm.
ダメだ。今休んだら凍え死んでしまうぞ。
Gotta keep those muscles producing lactic acid, which produces a burning sensation, though not exactly burning, so it won't really keep you warm. But you know what? You can't freeze to death if you're not in the cold. Let's get out of here. I hardened my heart and forced Mari to her feet.
もしこっちじゃなかったら。
Yeah, we did that earlier and it didn't kill us. I'm sure we'll be fine. There's no, encumbrance system in this game. And if we did, don't worry, I spent a lot of time grinding for flame shrooms. Mari suggested something truly horrifying. That we were lost. After much consternation, I ended up deciding we needed to keep going north. I decided we needed to go north. The uphill slope curved gently to the east. The dark and eerie forest seemed familiar to me, though different from when I'd seen it in the daytime. I asked Mari if we were going the right way, but she kept walking along in a daze, clearly exhausted. If we didn't get there soon, we'd both... Wait. There was no guarantee this was even the right road. Wouldn't it be wiser to go to the car and shelter there till morning? Even if the engine wouldn't start, at least we'd be protected from the snow. I mean, we'd already come this far. Could we really turn back now? I said a quick prayer and kept moving forward. So the road curved off to the east. Does that mean we want to keep going north again? Does that count?
見て、明かりよ。
It counts. Chat, I'm a genius. Mari clutched at my arm. As I peered out through the swirling blizzard, I could see a glimmer of light among the trees. It was faint, but it was definitely the glow of a building. My legs felt like they'd turned to pillars of ice there in the knee-deep snow. Still, I forced myself to take another step forward. Then another. I urged my unwilling body onward towards that glow. What if it turned out to be just a streetlight? No, I wouldn't allow myself to think such things. It was Spur Lodge. It had to be. We'd been walking long enough, after all. When we finally got there, Mr. and Mrs. Kamaitachi would be waiting for us with a warm meal. I stumbled a few times as my feet got stuck in the snow, but I didn't care. I just got up, brushed myself off, and kept moving forward. The light gradually got brighter and brighter. Now I was certain it was Spur Lodge.
助かったのね。
Seem to hydrate, thank you. Jeez, it's been an hour already. Yeah, I sure hope the culprit hasn't finished killing everybody when we get there. That would be really, really unfortunate. Mari, her nose running from the cold, murmured to herself in disbelief. Well, if your nose is running, you should probably go catch it. You kinda need that. You're an anime character, you have so little as is. Ha! Yine. I couldn't believe our good luck. I felt like we just won the lottery. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't good luck at all. If anything, it had been bad luck that we'd had to endure such a horrible experience in the first place. Is this just the game devs apologizing for putting this section in the game? Regardless, here it was before us. The warm sanctuary I thought we might never reach. There'd be hot food inside. Thank God. We were saved at last. I could barely contain my relief. With our final shreds of strength, we made our way to the front porch. Something seemed off. But I was in too much of a hurry to stop and figure out what. Besides, I couldn't wait to relax in a nice warm room, and have myself some soup or a mug of hot cocoa. I hurried onward, my head filled with thoughts of creature comforts. Just told it is, after all, just a little creature. He's very small.
あれは何？
Mari yanked me back by my jacket and pointed to the front door. What the? What's what? What's what? What? I gasped. There was a person collapsed by the doorway. Had someone else gotten lost, same as us? And they'd run out of strength at the last moment? But when we got closer, I could see the person wasn't dressed for the outdoors. That meant they were either a guest or employee of Spur Lodge. I climbed the porch steps and cautiously approached the figure.
年男さん
Well, rip that guy. It was Toshio, a part-time staffer at the lodge. He lay there, propped up against the doorway. Even more alarming was the river of dark blood streaming from his forehead. I rushed over to Toshio and started shaking him by the shoulders.
年男さん年男さん
But from the moment I touched him, I knew. There was no way he could still be alive. So much snow had piled up on him that his clothes were like solid ice. Even if he'd only passed out there, he surely would have frozen to death by now.
まさか死んでるの？
Oh, extremely. Interestingly enough, this is... So I was distracted. How do we know his name is Toshio? We didn't... The game doesn't begin on our first day here. We did have a chance to check in and go back down to the lodge, go down skiing. That's the whole reason we're here, remember? Interestingly enough, this is the same way Toshio dies on the route where you accuse the wrong person. Before. And, you know, the culprit has a chance to off everyone. So I guess our presence just didn't really amount to anything. So we knew everyone. I mean, we didn't really know Tanaka, which was kind of the point. Mikimoto did show up late, and it didn't really seem like people were all that familiar with the Hive Mind girls. It was really just, like, us knowing everyone's names. I nodded at Mari, wordlessly.
一体どうして？
とにかく中に入ろう。
I was about to open the door when I noticed its window was broken. Yep, he got locked outside with his head injury, tried to break his way in, and finished dying after smashing the window. This is exactly what happens if we just don't contribute anything. It was still locked. Apparently Toshio had smashed the glass in an attempt to force his way in. What the hell had been going on in there? I pressed the doorbell. Inside I heard chimes. We waited for a while, but no one came to greet us. Left with no other option, I reached through the broken window, unlocked the outer door, and proceeded inside. I wonder how weird it would be to do this route in your first playthrough. Well, that's not possible, remember? We unlocked the branch to this route by finishing the game normally.
何かあったのかしら？
そうかもしれない。誰かいませんか？小林さん。
You could make a drinking game out of the amount of Kobayashi-sans there are in this game. I loudly announced our arrival, and no one answered.
とりあえず部屋に戻ってこの服を何とかしようか。このままじゃ僕たちも凍え死んでしまう。
With that in mind, we made our way up the steps. But what we found up there was equally shocking. Yep, you took a tumble down the stairs. Bloop, 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 bloop. There was a woman, sprawled face up on the hallway floor. She wasn't moving, and there was an enormous pool of blood around her head. I inched towards the woman, still holding Mari's hand. I just realized her necklace broke. Yeah, you know, funny story, this is actually a very, expanded take on Batman's origin story. He was just trying to steal her pearl necklace. I inched towards the woman, still holding Mari's hand. It was one of the other guests, Mrs. Kayama. I reached out and felt for a pulse. I jerked my hand back from her neck. She was ice cold.
一体どうなってるの？
Mari began to whimper, whimpering and whining. What a horse. We'd come here seeking salvation, but all we'd found was an even worse nightmare. After everything I'd been through that night, my mind sort of froze up. Badumchish.
小林さん、奥さん、誰か
I cried out in panic. My voice was quaking with fear, but I knew I had to stay strong for Mari's sake. The only response was a terrible silence. I seriously contemplated turning around and going back out into the blizzard. I didn't want to be here. Something evil had happened here. Evil. Evil. Every fiber of my being was screaming for me to flee, but the rational side of my brain intervened.
小林さんたちの部屋へ行ってみよう。
We went back down the stairs and headed for their living quarters. I'm sure they'll be fine.
私怖い。
Earlier we'd been shivering from the cold, but now it was from fear. Neither of us could stop our teeth from chattering.
離れるんじゃないぞ。
I instinctively dropped my voice to a whisper. Someone could be out there, stealthily laying in wait for us. I strained my ears, but all I could hear was the slight creaking of the floorboards and the sound of the wind outside. Eventually, and with that, I looked through the open door. And this must have been really cheap for the CG artists. Kobayashi was there on the floor, his back to the wall and his legs splayed out before him. A large kitchen knife protruded from his stomach, and a pool of blood had formed beneath him. I felt like I was going to throw up. I clamped a hand over my mouth and rushed to the bathroom. Alright, he's stabilized now, okay. But it too had become an abattoir. Kobayashi's wife was there. Naked, her head propped against the tub. Her sightless eyes stared up at me. Alright, that was a pretty decent scream. I give it a 7.5 out of 10. I ran from the room in a blind panic. I could barely speak, but Mari seemed to understand.
みんな殺されたの？一体誰に？
I can't believe all of the people are dead. I grabbed Mari by the hand and ran for the front desk. When we got there, I snatched up the phone and tried to dial 110 for the police. But when I pressed my ear against the receiver, I realized no sound was coming out no matter how long I waited. I jiggled the phone hooks a few times, but nothing changed. I saw despair in Mari's eyes.
どうして？一体何がどうなったのよ？
She began to scream hysterically. She's hysterical. I wanted nothing more than to do the same. But after seeing her like this, I realized at least one of us needed to keep it together.
マリ、マリ、落ち着くんだ。部屋に行こう。暖かくして、朝まで待つんだ。
A gleaming tear trickled down her cheek.
誰がこんなことをしたの？誰がこんなひどいことを？
わからないよ。強盗かもしれないし、頭のおかしいやつなのかもしれない。多分もうここにはいないと思うけど、万が一ってこともあるから、なんとかして身を守らなきゃ。
Yeah, I'm sure they're already long gone to the blizzard you all just spent an hour escaping from. Perhaps the shock for Uncle's death was finally starting to sink in. Or maybe a night of sustained fear left her nerves in tatters. But Mari was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Her face was a tear-stained mess. I pulled her close and wrapped my arms around her.
しっかりするんだ。さあ、部屋に行こう。
I put my arm around Mari's shoulders and led her back upstairs. Doing my best not to look at Mrs. Kayama's corpse, I opened the door to my room. Yeah, I'm not sure where we could go from here. We don't really have any leads relating to the culprit's identity unless we just coincidentally notice. I took a quick look around, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. The room seemed to be empty. I checked the bathroom, just to be safe. Nothing there either. As I locked the door behind us, a wave of relief washed over me. I collapsed onto my bed.
これ夢じゃないの？悪い夢じゃないの？ねえトール、夢だって言ってよ。
大丈夫だよ。何があったのかわからないけど、僕たちは遅れたせいで助かったんだ。朝になれば。
In the morning! I don't know why I stopped, I don't really have a follow-up to that. Okay, there we are. A scream rang out from somewhere in the building, sending chills down my spine. It was a woman's scream. Someone else had been alive inside the lodge. But was she now dead as well? Murdered by some unseen killer? Mari and I reflexively held each other tighter. The woman screamed again. I could feel Mari flinch in fright. The silence that followed was agonizing. Then we heard the faint creaking of floorboards. Okay, hold on, something did just occur to me. We never met. I said earlier that we'd met everybody before the beginning of the game, but we never met Tanaka. When Toru first lay eyes on him, he was like, "Oh, what's the deal with that guy? He looks so suspicious." So what I'm getting at is that Tanaka and Mikimura, both of them have never seen us. They didn't see us before because we were lost out on the slopes. They didn't see us when we snuck our way back in. So logically speaking, if either of them are still alive, neither of them should know that we're still here. Someone was walking down the hallway. Slowly. Step by step. Getting closer. I gripped Mari's hand. We'd be okay. No one even knew that Mari and I were here. Probably. The footsteps stopped outside our door. Interview of Mario is granted totally to go. I mean, like, so many murders have taken place in this house that weren't overheard by anybody, but I'm forced to assume that this house just has incredibly good soundproofing. Which my house had incredibly good soundproofing. I was terrified that my nervous gulp could be heard out in the hallway. The knob rattled. Someone was trying to force the door. A few moments later, there was a polite knock. Mario and I looked at each other. The knocking grew louder, angrier. Seemed our nightmare was just beginning. And then they just kind of stopped. Alright, so that case happened because it stuck out there the whole time. I'm curious if... Hold on. Alright, we know the route now, so we should be able to... North... North... Wait, hold on. Northwest... North... North... Forward. That wasn't an ideal routing. It's northwest, north. Now that is just the length of the walk. Okay, one more thing. One more thing I want to check. North, west. Going north. Need to go north. Specifically cutting our losses feels like could potentially be. I turned back, hoping to cut our losses. Down a long road past the bus shelter. And finally back to the fir tree. If we went south from here, we should find our car. There was no sign of it. You think it could have gotten bent so much that the weight of the snow just flattened it like a pancake? If that's the case, then we did make the right decision getting out of it, let me tell you. I collapsed onto the snow. Dame da ne. Dame yo. Dame nanayo. Antoga. Sukide. Suki sugide. Okay, what? Ow. His hand whistled through the air, slapping me hard across the face. God, okay, I didn't think the singing was that bad. I got back to my feet. There was a thick fir tree at the center of the cross. Alright, that's just rude. What have we not done already? North. North. North again. Climbed back up to the cliff where I'd almost fallen. Just as before, we could see a light in the distance. Turn ourselves back down the hill. So we should go east. There's a slow hill that ran north to south. Alright, I think that's all we had left. Let's get out of here. Oh, that's an hour 25. Tell me, you did specifically say you wanted to see us start a novel before we ended stream today. Would you like to jump on that now? I don't really have any other ideas. Alright, in we go. We are now completely divorced from the main route. Let's see where this drops us off. Quite an arc. As the train continued north, past Matsumoto Station, the scenery outside began turning white before my very eyes. We passed through a tunnel, and though nothing looked drastically different when we emerged, we were now officially in Snow Country. Snow Country is in fact Snow Country for old men. Fortunately, there aren't any old men in this game. Except Kayama, who cares about Kayama? The Hakuba Mountains ran north-south along the tracks, and just as the name suggested, Hakuba literally meant white horse. The line of snowy peaks reminded me of the back of a pure white steed. God, what is it with Ryukishi games and white horse? I mean, honestly. Oh, Mari, you changed your jumper. As Mari echoed what we just heard from the train's conductor, I felt a twinge of disappointment. It's like the trip was already over. But of course our journey had only just begun. That particular day, Mari was clad in a black turtleneck and skinny jeans. It was hot and stuffy inside the train, so we'd both taken off our winter jackets. Mari had long black hair without a hint of frizz and large, luminous eyes that looked out at me from delicate features. She was super kawaii desu ne. I realized all over again just how gorgeous she was. Well, I'm sorry, princess. Would you like me to prepare your afternoon tea, too? Oh, don't you know tonight's dinner is brioche, your highness? I stood and pulled our 2 bags down from the overhead rack. We were only staying for 2 nights, but since this was a ski trip, we each needed an oversized bag with plenty of changes of clothes. Looking around, I could see that many of the other passengers had opted to bring skis with them as well. Skiing really so amazing? Could it really be worth all this hassle? I had come on this trip believing Mari's promises that we'd have fun, and now I found myself doubting that I'd actually enjoy myself. Yeah, this is how I feel every time I go on any sort of vacation that requires me to leave the house. At the large rotary outside the station, taxis and shuttle buses were waiting to take people to local ski resorts. Most of the other passengers headed off in that direction, but Mari looked around and waved as if she just spotted something. A silver SUV. Everyone drives SUVs, man. The economy was doing great, and we didn't care about the environment. There's a causal link between those two in at least one direction. A silver SUV parked a short distance away started to move, then stopped right in front of us.
Yeah, Mari-chan, hisashiburi.
The man in the driver's seat called out to us, a smile on his face.
Sa notte.
I tossed our bags into the rear of the vehicle and slid into the back seat alongside Mari.
ペンションシュプールのご主人様よ。
どうもお世話になります。
I bowed my head to him.
いらっしゃい。君がトール君？スキーは初めてなんだって？
Kobayashi grinned at me in the rearview mirror as he started up the car. Wait, the car hasn't started yet? Then why is the shaking? Is the cameraman drunk again? Damn it, Samson, I told you to stop doing that on work days. Get yourself killed one of the days. See, Mari had already told her uncle a bit about me.
ええ、そうなんです。
マリちゃんのしごきについていくのは大変かもしれないよ。覚悟しといた方がいいな。
You should definitely ski as much as possible. It definitely will not result in a really boring ending.
やだおじさん、しごいたりなんかしないわよ。
And there could be. I laughed at this, but it soon became apparent that Kobayashi wasn't joking. We dropped off our luggage at the hotel, changed clothes, and rented some skis from Kobayashi.
運転はできるんだろ？
はい、一応。
You just get in the car and hit the go button, right?
なら悪いけど2人だけで行ってくれないかな。もうじきまたお客さんが来るはずなんでね。ほら、これがキー。
Surprising lack of use of keys for an orthodox Japanese mystery. We loaded our gear in Kobayashi's SUV and started out for the ski resort. It was nearly noon. On any other day, we'd be having lunch right about now, but Mari was eager to hit the slopes as soon as possible. Kamaitachi no Yoru 0. Ski Origins. The road was patchy with snow and ice, but this car's winter tires gave us little cause for concern. We managed to make it to the slopes without getting lost once. This was due mainly to directions from Mari, who seems to have been here many times. Not to mention some strategically placed road signs. Wish I had strategically placed road signs. The road signs in my local town are very unstrategically placed. It's very confusing. The trip only took 15 minutes in total. Hey, that's what they said. I don't know why it keeps doing that. All in all, it seemed like Kobayashi had picked an inconvenient place to ski lodge like Spur. I was starting to wonder if there would be any other guests there besides ourselves. Normally, it should have taken us no more than a minute to get from the parking lot to the slope, but with my unfamiliar boots and bulky skis, it felt more like an eternity.
マリ、先に昼飯食おうよ。
I mean, it's noon, that's when you're supposed to have lunch. That's what it says in the employee handbook, at least.
情けないわね。ダメ。とりあえず一回滑ってからよ。
ダメだね。ダメよ。ダメなのよ。I showed me no mercy. Once we hit the slopes, I fell down every few feet. It took me nearly half an hour to make it down the bunny slope. By the end, I was sweaty, hungry, exhausted, and entirely covered in snow. But I mean, that's a fairly normal one for me, so I don't know what Toru's complaining about.
お願いだ、マリ。昼飯にしよう。
Mari seems to abhor the thought of wasting any time eating, but she was probably hungry by that point as well. She reluctantly agreed to take off her skis and accompany me to the resort restaurant. After a late lunch, even more ski drills awaited me. Ski drills are really underrated Pokemon, if you ask me. Every muscle in my body ached. Probably because I kept falling down so often. Still, by the time we were ready to leave for the day, I was about to snowplow my way down the hill. As the sun set, the sky clouded over, and an ominous wind began to blow. It was so cold that my sweat-covered body began to freeze the moment I stopped moving.
そろそろ帰ろうよ。
Yeah, we'd hate to be trapped in some sort of blizzard maze out there on the ski mountains. That'd be really boring. I pleaded with Mari as she finished yet another run. Mari pulled off her ski goggles, gave the sky a stern look, then nodded. This route is going to end with Mari, like, fighting the sun. Take revenge for ruining all her ski trips. And you know something? I think she'd probably win.
そうね。早めに引き上げた方が良さそうね。
そう。予報じゃ別に何も言ってなかったけど。
Mari shook her head slowly.
うんうん。今夜は荒れるわよ。急ぎましょう。
As if to confirm her own dire predictions, snow was already falling by the time we reached the parking lot and changed out of our ski boots.
帰りは私が運転するわ。トール体ガタガタでしょ？
頼むよ。
Mari driving. Meow. Mari sped recklessly back along the roads to the lodge. The duality of drivers. We must have been driving 10 minutes at most, but in that time the sun had disappeared and the snow began to fall in earnest. And on everyone else, too.
こんな夜は。
Mari began to mutter something to herself.
何？こんな夜はどうしたの？
Mari smiled and shook her head.
うん。なんでもないの。
Discord Light has redeemed a hydrate. Thank you very much. And welcome to the stream, Discord. I'm sorry I don't use your screen share function for streams and all that often. So I'm out of the Shadow Realms, Jason outside of Denny's. Well, how's your day been going? Well, it is in fact going, as I've said in the past. We finally started a novel. The additional branch way off to the side that doesn't connect to the main route. What does it mean? I don't know. Guess we'll find out. So far it looks like it's been a prequel, but it's a matter of time before we connect to the main route, and I don't know what they'll do then. The building boasted log cabin styling and an appallingly bright interior. That's not what it says, it's what I think, because I have sensitive eyes. It was a cozy little hideaway, and every inch of the place had been swept until spotless. I just want to see how you're doing, and I'm gonna go eat, so have a great day. You should probably do that, it's important if you want to not die. Thank you for coming in. Very well. We stashed our skis in the attached dining room. I mean, really, isn't every room in this lodge going to be a dining room in a few hours? And headed inside. Kobayashi, who must have heard our car approaching, came out to greet us.
おかえり。彼はどうだった？
I only broke 3 bones. I think that's an accomplishment.
まあ あんなもんでしょう。もうちょっと根性あるかと思ってたんだけど。
厳しいね。トール君、明日は体動かないかもしれないよ。筋肉痛の薬貸してあげるから寝る前に塗っとくといい。
Kobayashi, nobody here wants to hear about your special cream. And honestly. Maybe if you were younger, but
はい、ありがとうございます。
arigatou gozaimasu. Just then, I noticed a middle-aged couple sitting in the lounge, looking at me. Quick, stay back. Assert dominance. G. As I gave them a quick nod of greeting, Kobayashi spoke up.
一応紹介しとこうか。私が昔世話になった人で、大阪で会社をやっておられる加山さんと奥さんの春子さん。こっちは私の姪のマリと大学の友人のトールくんです。
Does Kayama have a first name? I don't think we ever figured that out.
どうも。
はい、どうも。
こんにちは。
君の姪？そうは見えへんな。
Fat man named Kayama said this in a thick Kansai accent as he ogled Mari from top to bottom. Kayama's wife was a beautiful younger woman who, on further reflection, I'd hesitate to call middle-aged. He quietly chortled and bowed to us. Now, you don't hear people chortle all that often. Like, I mean, you know, lots of people laugh, giggle, sometimes they even chuckle, but like, when was the last time you heard a real person really sit down and chortle? Like inside of a Mario and Luigi game.
相当滑ってきたみたいやな。えらい疲れた顔しとるで。
Yes, we were skiing up a storm. It actually is our fault that the storm is happening. If we had just skied a bit less, none of this would have happened. The moral of the story, kids, never exercise.
まあ。
I glanced over at Molly with a rueful grin, but her face was all innocence.
大したことないんですよ。滑り足りないくらいで。
Of course she'd say that.
夕食は7時からだから、着替えてシャワーでも浴びてくるといいよ。
Yeah, feel free to take a load off, take your pants off. Kobayashi then disappeared into the kitchen. Naturally, or more like tragically, Mari and I had been placed in separate rooms. My room had a bath, so after quickly rinsing away the day's sweat, I got dressed and fell back into bed. Mari's enthusiasm for skiing went beyond all human endurance. Well, certainly beyond my endurance. I was starting to doze off when I heard a knock at the door.
トール、何してるの？下に降りるわよ。
Yeah. I groggily rolled out of bed and went down to the lounge with Mari. Mr. and Mrs. Kama had now been joined by a group of 3 girls. The trio was browsing through a local tourism magazine, giggling and whispering among themselves. The middle girl, who seemed to be nicknamed Kana, was circling various articles with a red pen. Am I trying to find an Italian restaurant or something? As we all know, it's impossible to circle anything other than an Italian restaurant in red pen. The girl to her right, a chubby cutie with shortish hair, was Keiko. And the girl to her left, wearing outsized glasses and absolutely nothing else worthy of mention, was Aki.
どの子が好みなの？
I thought her name was Yaoi. No, Yaoi is an entirely different thing, Otome. I'd think you'd understand that better than anyone. Mari asked me this, Frosty whisper.
違うって、そんなつもりで見てたわけじゃ。
Okay, we have reunited with the main game. That was her name. No, remember Yaoi was the actress those three mistook Mari for. Anyway, it looks kind of like a novel is literally just the game redone as a kinetic novel. I'm not sure if... They're not letting us skip. Oh, that's the name of the potato girl. Alright, stop yelling at me, you boyd. First we glanced at my watch, but its digital display still read 6:55 p.m. I hadn't bothered to set its time lately, so it must have been slow. I heard someone clicking their tongue in disapproval, then I looked up to see Kayama fiddling with his own watch. Unlike my cheap timepiece, Kayama's watch seems to be an expensive clockwork model, so he probably had to wind it often. As if he'd been waiting for the cuckoo to finish calling out the hour, Kobayashi suddenly appeared in the lounge.
食事の用意ができましたよ。どうぞ食堂の方へ。
So I guess you could call this the canon route. This might at least be interesting to see. Maybe Toru will come across as a bit less incompetent when I'm not deliberately forcing him to make bad decisions for content. I didn't usually eat dinner this early, but I realized a day filled with strenuous exercise had left me famished. I took all my self-control to keep from sprinting towards the food. Apart from the Kayamas and the three girls, someone else was seated there in the dining room. A man around 30 or so wearing dark sunglasses. While Mrs. Kobayashi and one of the part-timers brought out the food, Mr. Kobayashi briefly introduced everyone, starting with himself.
それからこちらの3人はランチョン、スーチョン、ミキちゃんじゃなくて渡瀬かな子さん、北野恵子さん、川村あきさん、東京からいらっしゃいました。
Alright, there we have it, all laid out in one place. Feel free to write it down so you don't get it confused again. Not that they're actually like separate characters. But they are super spies, just like he implied, that's the twist. The trio laughed and bowed their heads to no one in particular.
そちらの渋い男性は田中一郎さんとおっしゃいます。
Ichiro Tanaka. Everyone turned to look at the man in the sunglasses. He didn't reach to Kobayashi's introduction. For a moment I wondered if the man wasn't really Tanaka. That was impossible. How could it be that that guy isn't named Tanaka? I mean, look at him. There was no one left to be introduced after all. And awkward silence filled the room, but Kobayashi immediately chimed in cheerfully.
では、ごゆっくり。
The food was abundant and delicious. By the time we finished our coffee, even the stoic man in sunglasses seemed to wear a satisfied smile on his face. When Kobayashi invited him to socialize in the lounge, Tanaka refused and hurried up to his room, clearly annoyed. Everyone else, however, decided to relax in the lounge for a little after-dinner conversation. Before our little group had even finished settling in, the light suddenly flickered and went out. The girl's screams echoed in the darkness. Someone's hand found mine and clutched it tightly. Mari. It was Mari's. I put my hand reassuringly over hers. As I did, I saw the digital display of my watch floating there in the darkness. That hand belonged to Toshio. Yeah, he was just mistaken. Toshio actually has a meticulous moisturizing regimen, don't you know? It was 8:15 p.m.
どないしたんや？停電か？
Kayama sounded slightly panicked.
大丈夫です。皆さん、落ち着いてください。私がすぐろうそくを持ってきますから。
You know, usually I like to advise people to spend less money on candles, but I guess Kobayashi's are coming through for us. I could vaguely see Kobayashi's silhouette moving through the room. Suddenly, a small light flared in the darkness. It's a small light. I wonder what Toru uses to light his own home. Kobayashi had grabbed a flashlight he kept at the ready.
京子、一緒に来てくれ。
As the couple followed the flashlight's beam out of the lounge, the room sank once more into total darkness.
やだ
Oh no, please don't cast me into darkness, Mr. Building. That's you, that's what you sound like.
信じらんない。アキ、ちゃんといる？いるいる。
The three girls started whispering to one another. God, it's like trying to go to sleep at a sleepover when everyone else is talking.
大丈夫。すぐ元に戻るよ。
I held Mary's hand as I said this. Her bosom pressed up against my arm. It seemed surprisingly supple even through her sweater. I could feel the pounding of a heartbeat at the point where our bodies met. Thought it was her heart, but was it her heart that was beating so fast? Or mine? I found myself worrying that if the power came on just then, everyone would see how furiously I was blushing. A short while later, the flashlight returned. Mr. and Mrs. Kobayashi seemed to have found some candles. When they set the candles out on the coffee table and lit them, I was able to see the faces of the people around me once more.
風が相当強くなってきたみたいです。どこかで送電線が切れたんだとしたら、今晩の復旧は無理かもしれません。
Kaima's very quiet. He might be dead. What are you talking about? He knows judo. He can't die that easily. Kobayashi said this apologetically.
見たいテレビがあったのに。
What is it with Aki and the television? What is she watching that's so important? And was Aki one of the three girls who had raised this trivial complaint?
自家発電とかできないんですか？
こんなことはめったにないことなんでね。そこまでの用意はないんですよ。
Wait, you live all the way out in the mountains and this doesn't happen that often? I'm very surprised, actually. You must have a very good provider. Perhaps comforted by the candlelight, Maria let go and stood up. Then she walked over to the window, pulled aside the curtains, and looked outside. She has to watch the latest episode of Detective Conan. No, she doesn't. It's just gonna be a random... Well, she should have read the manga. You don't gotta keep up with every single episode that comes out. I mean, the most recent episode is, in fact, just a totally random filler episode, not even based on the manga, so she's not missing anything. And who's this writer? Oh, you do. Koko gets drunk in Satsuma. Mysterious case near the pond. Case of the crashed UFO. Yeah, you're nothing special. She can afford to miss this one at the very least. Perhaps comforted by the candlelight, Mari let go of my hand and stood up. Then she walked over to the window, pulled aside the curtain, and looked outside.
暗くてよくわからないけど、雪がひどくなってるみたい。
申し訳ありませんが、こうなったら早めにお休みいただいた方がいいかもしれませんね。
Yeah, if we're not gonna get internet service on our phones either, then I mean, what are we gonna do while we're awake? honestly. One of the part-time lodge employees, a woman named Midori, offered a better idea.
せっかくこんな雰囲気なんだから、怪談話なんかするのもいいんじゃないですか？
Ghost stories? That was an absolutely wild anime.
私そういうの全然ダメなの。
I thought you and Keiko have been making the same face for the past several minutes. XD. XD indeed. Keiko sounded strangely happy as she said this, however. You and your potato. You're an awful liar, I thought to myself. We could put you away in a heartbeat. But I wasn't really into that sort of stuff either, but I decided not to say anything.
百物語ってやつか？いいね。やろうよ。
Toshio's face was eerily illuminated by flickering candlelight. I wish I would have finished that pack of potatoes by now. Yeah, chip bags always last about half as long as you think they should.
ちょっと待ってくれ、トシオくん。部屋に戻りたいという方がいたらお送りしますよ。ろうそくもお貸しします。いかがですか？
Seriously, why do you have so many candles? Kobayashi had no takers. Guess everyone felt more comfortable having other people around them. I wondered which was scarier, listening to ghost stories together in a group, or being all alone in a dark room, or drinking beer in a heated room in the middle of winter, or eating hot pot while curled around the fire in Antarctica. In the end, I chose to stay with Mari, but that turned out to be a mistake. It's not even really foreshadowing, it's just spoilers. To fight the chill, we fired up an old kerosene heater and wrapped some blankets around ourselves. Then Mari began to speak.
これは実は本当にあったことなんだけど。
The story you're about to hear is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocents. Standard introduction for any good ghost story. See, this happened to a guy who knew this guy, 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 who knew this guy's cousin. That part was always a lie, of course. But I gulped nervously regardless.
私やこのおじさんの先祖は小林久左衛門といってこの辺りの大地主だったんだけど、山の頂上から見渡す限りの土地をほとんど持ってたんですって。
You said you knew this guy for a total of 33 times. I don't think you counted that correctly. Anyway, this story is absolutely going to be a true story.
嫌な話だけど、小作人たちからは絞り取れるだけ絞り取った相当ひどい人だったらしいわ。ね、そうでしょ、おじさん。
その話はやめなさい。
Kobayashi sounded a little vexed.
つまらない話だ。
あら、どうして？面白い話じゃない。それでね、トール。かまいたちって知ってるでしょ？
You mean like the Kamaitachi no Yoru, written as Saisei, available on PC?
かまいたちつむじ風で真空状態か何かになって怪我したりするってやつ？
そう。この地方にはかまいたちで怪我をしたって人が大勢いるの。とりわけこんな風に冷たい風の吹く吹雪の夜にはね。
I had heard the stories, of course, but I had written them off as mere superstition.
かまいたちに会うのはほとんどが男の人だったらしくてね。
I mean, men are more likely to do stupid shit like going outside. Just in general, going outside. That's some pretty stupid shit, let me tell you. Who needs sunlight anyway?
この地方では不幸な死に方をした女の人の魂がかまいたちになって恨んでいる男に切りつけるんだって言われてるの。
Okay, but what if the soul of a woman who suffers an unhappy death dies after the man who wronged her? You ever think of that? Honestly, it's like the authors didn't put any thought into this story whatsoever. Gosh. I wondered, what's the only way an otherwise powerless woman could get her revenge?
久左衛門はひどい女たらしだったらしくて、一度目をつけた女性は必ず手に入れたらしいわ。ある時、許嫁のいる村の娘に手を出して、その人は舌を噛んで自殺したの。久左衛門を呪いながらね。
Well, it can't have been a very clear curse if she delivered it with a missing tongue. I mean, have you ever tried to talk without using your tongue? It's really hard. You're just kind of so dumb, you can't enunciate words properly. Can't really say R or L or R. You just kind of sound like you're on cocaine. I tell you what. Mary shook her head sadly. Is that really true? And if so, could that curse have been passed down through her family bloodline? I felt an unpleasant tingle run along my spine, as if a bug were crawling up my back.
それ以来、久左衛門は外出するたびにかまいたちに襲われるようになったそうよ。ひどい時には服がボロボロになるほど。
Man, I can't believe they actually stripped him naked. Even in death, the women loved that guy.
とうとう彼は風の強い日には絶対で歩かないようになったの。そしてちょうど1年後、女の人の命日も今日みたいにひどい吹雪の晩だったらしいわ。久左衛門はお屋敷の奥座敷から一歩も外に出なかった。食事も運ばせてね。ところが翌朝彼は起きてこなかった。女中が見に行くと辺りは血の海だった。
I heard someone gasp.
喉がパックリと切れていたのが致命傷だったんだけど、全身に無数の切り傷があったそうよ。畳や布団もボロボロ。でもそれは彼が寝ていたほんの1畳ほどの部分だけで、それ以外は何の変化もなかったの。まるでそこだけ突然かまいたちが発生して荒れ狂ったみたいにね。
Don't they have their way with them? No one spoke for a while. Well, I'd say that chilling story was a cut above the rest, wouldn't you all? That's the best crypt keeper I could pull out on short notice, I'm sorry. Then, with a sudden crash, the lounge window flew open. Freezing wind and snow roared into the room. The candle's flames were blown out in an instant. My heart almost stopped. The girl's screams tore through the darkness. I stood up and started shouting in a panic as well. Someone closed the window, then the candles were quickly relit. Kobayashi spoke.
落ち着いて、落ち着いて。きちんと閉まってなかっただけです。偶然とはいえ、みんなを怖がらせる役には立ったようだね、マリちゃん。
Kobayashi, who must have already known the details of the story, sounded shaken anyway. His voice had a shrill edge to it. Mari shook her head.
あら、偶然じゃないのよ。さっき立った時、窓のところに毛糸を輪にして結びつけておいたの。 引っ張ると留め金が外れるようにね。
Oh. Is that an element of foreshadowing I do see?
さらに引くと輪が外れて手元に戻ってくるってわけ。
No, String. You are the lazy cheater solution to mystery stories. Incredible. I couldn't believe Mari had pulled one over on us. Even though I knew it was all a ruse, my heart was still clanging like an alarm bell. Clanging. Toto, have you been a cyborg this whole time? You would tell me if you were a robot, right? Then, there was a flicker, and the room was filled with bright lights. Power had come back on. Everyone sighed with relief. It was all going to be okay, I thought to myself.
お茶でも入れましょうね。
All of a sudden I realized I was incredibly thirsty. Yeah, we know, Toru. We've heard the way you talk about Mare.
私ちょっとお手洗いに。
Kanako stood up.
私も。
The Kaima wife seems unhappy. I mean, she could die and curse her husband. Yeah, well, she would have to die first, and, that will wind up happening either way, so there's really no downside for her. All the girls were standing by this point. Eventually, even Midori ended up joining them. They headed off to the bathroom in one big group. Why did the girls all want to go to the bathroom together? Was it because they were still spooked by Mari's story? The more I thought about it, however, the more I wished I could join them. Okay. By the time everyone returned from their bathroom break, the tea was ready. It had a sweet floral aroma.
ああ、いい香り。何のお茶ですか？
Kind made from tea leaves. What do you want from me? Kyoko turned to answer
ラベンダー
her.
ティーなの。珍しいでしょ？
I mean, no, kinda. We slowly savored the hot tea, blowing on it between sips. Midori the part-timer finally seemed to relax when she'd finished with hers.
ねえ、さっきの話、マリさんが自分で作ったの？結構よくできてたわね。
I kinda want tea, but if I make some, I'll miss out on the rest of the stream. I mean, the way things are going now, there's a decent chance you won't miss anything of consequence.
あれは本当の話なのよ。ね、おじさん。
Mari looked over at Kobayashi. Although he was frowning, he still gave a slight nod. The girls glanced at one another nervously.
ほらね。
Mari stared back at Midori in triumph. There was a beat, then... I can't do it. I'm sorry. Midori started cackling madly.
もうやだ。小林さんもグルだったのね。すっかり騙されるとこだったわ。
I was about to breathe a sigh of relief when Kobayashi spoke.
いや、そうじゃないよ。そういう話が伝わってるのは本当のことなんだ。先祖の一人がひどい死に方をしたというのも昔調べたことがあるから確かなことだ。
Oh, I see. Kobayashi also worked for the Historical Society before he was a lawyer, before he was a mountain monk, before he was a salaryman, before he was a lodge owner.
ただもちろん、かまいたちだの女の恨みだのなんて話は信じちゃいないけどね。
Even though it had taken place a long time ago, Kobayashi seemed uncomfortable discussing the skeleton in his ancestor's closet. Not because it made for a scary story, but because it didn't put his family in the best light. Seeing him like this, the group's enthusiasm suddenly evaporated. No one really wanted to keep telling ghost stories anymore. Yeah, we only have time for ghost stories that involve this story of... You live in the mystery world. Are you fond of thrillers in general? I hate thrillers. I genuinely despise the entire genre. Every thriller I've ever read is one I picked up because it was inaccurately shelved on the mystery shelf. And that has prejudiced me against the genre so hard I don't think I'll ever be able to look back on it. I was secretly thankful for that fact. If we had kept it up much longer, I was worried I had trouble getting to sleep that night.
私見たいテレビがあるんだった。
How'd you get that thing I sent you? It was Aki, the girl in the glasses, who said this. Naturally. More. Is there anything else you dislike about it in particular, though? I don't know, it just feels... It feels like lazy.
失礼します。おやすみなさい。
You just get bad guys with generic motives, you have them shoot at a couple of people. There's violence happening. You put in an incredibly ham-fisted, forced romantic subplot. It's absolutely nothing. If you'll excuse me, good night. Good night, moon. Good night, stars. Good night, the Kamaitachi. The other two girls stood up as well, and the three of them went back to their room.
階段なんかじゃなくて、ゲームでもしませんか?
Hello there, chat member. I want to play a game. When Kobayashi suggested this, Kayam struggled to his feet. Bro, are you still alive?
若い人らだけの方がええやろ。わしらこれで失礼しますさ。
I mean, he could be a zombie. Cuckoo clock on the wall chimed 9 p.m. We only recorded the sound clip for 7 though, so we didn't hear anything. We have 2 beds in their room, but they probably share a single one. Probably. In the end, there were only 6 of us left. Me, Mari, Midori, Toshio, and Mr. and Mrs. Kobayashi. Toshio brought out a deck of cards. We all played Napoleon for a while. The blizzard showed no signs of slowing, but thankfully the power didn't cut out again. Mikimoto hasn't shown up yet. That's very interesting. Didn't know Napoleon was a game. I don't really play card games. But don't interrupt me. Yeah, I don't really play all that many card games. I don't like games that have that much of a luck component to them. I yawned at the mere mention of the hour. A mental image I had of myself at that moment. Mouth wide, eyes closed. Like a cartoon character falling after realizing there was no ground beneath him. Struck me as incredibly funny for some reason. Maybe his entrance was interrupted by the lights going out. Well, interrupting his entrance wouldn't cause him to disappear from existence, would it? What? Would it? I was tempted to try sneaking into Mari's room later, but I was so exhausted that I decided to settle for a quiet night's sleep instead.
おやすみなさい。
Mari and I headed to our respective rooms, leaving Kobayashi's and their 2 employees downstairs alone. There were no single rooms in Spur Lodge, and Mari and I each basically had a twin room to ourselves. The bed frames were Scandinavian in style, crafted from warm-colored wood. There was also a TV and a VCR, though it seems not every room had such amenities. I could go downstairs and borrow some videos if I wanted, but I simply didn't have the energy. By the time I changed into my pajamas and climbed into the bed, the digital display on the VCR read 11:10 p.m. The numbers blink on and off. A vague thought began to take form in my mind. I fell asleep before I could figure out what it was. And thus Toru has once again failed to invent nuclear fusion. Someone was shaking me and calling my name.
トール、いい加減起きなさいよ。
Alright. I opened my eyelids a crack. Maybe it was because of the homey atmosphere here, but I seemed to have forgotten to lock my door.
今何時？
もう8時40分よ。8時半から朝食だってちゃんと聞いたでしょ？
No, I don't believe I did. I glanced up at the VCR. It was blinking 8:20 a.m.
まだ20分じゃないか。すぐ降りていくから。
Mari tilted her head.
あれ？変ね。まあいいわ。とにかくみんなもう食べ始めてるんだから。
Alright, so he's already started tampering with the clocks. 20 minutes is certainly long enough for the culprit to, develop an alibi if they can move, competently quickly.
わかったから出て行ってくれない？
ん？
僕の着替え見たいの？
His face turned beet red. If those are the color your beets are, you should maybe get a refund.
バカ！
She fled the room. I threw on some clothes and hurried downstairs. Mari seemed to have been mistaken when she had said everyone had started to eat. Only 7 guests seated at the tables, including us. One person was missing. I realized almost instantly who it was. The guy with the sunglasses. Mr. Tanaka. This looks very cozy. Yeah, the lighting in this scene is actually really good. It's not too bad about Tanaka, though. I bet he would have loved to not have been chopped into little sliced bits before this case started.
あのサングラスの人は？
Asked Midori about it as she served me coffee.
まだ寝てるみたいなんです。何度ノックしても起きなくて。
Oh, he's sleeping, alright. He's sleeping forever. Wasn't that strange, though? Tanaka had returned to his room way earlier than the rest of us. Even after everyone had finished eating, he still hadn't come down. We filed out to the lounge as usual.
まあどっちみちこの天気じゃ早起きしたってしょうがないけどね。
If you can't ski, there's no point to existing at all. That's Mari's philosophy. Mari looked out the window. The blizzard showed no signs of stopping. The world outside the window was shrouded in white.
今日は一日こんな調子なのかな。ここでじっとしてるしかないの。
Though I'd mostly been talking to myself, Kobayashi answered me.
予報じゃ夜中くらいまでは低気圧が居座ってるって話だよ。雪崩警報も出てる。
Alright, so worst case scenario, we could go for the rocks fall, everyone dies ending. We all just get buried under an avalanche.
私たち今日帰らなきゃいけないのに。
Kako's voice sounded reproachful as she addressed Kobayashi.
ないから今日はやめた方がいいよ。それに免許取り立てだったでしょ。悪いこと言わないからもう一晩泊まっていきなさい。お金は食事代だけでいいからさ。
The mystery will be who killed Mikimoto this time. Well, first Mikimoto would have to be present.
ねえどうする？
Okay, I guess technically he could be, we don't know. Kanako consulted with her two friends.
しょうがないじゃない。帰れないんだもの。
Everyone shares rooms except us and Mari. So technically everyone has an alibi. Alright, Mikimoto's not on the board. Who's that? Who's who? Me and... We don't share a room. Mari doesn't share a room. We're both alone in this world. We don't have any choice. We can't get home.
でもさ、休み取る時も課長渋ってたでしょ？明日3人とも行けないなんて聞いたら、きっとヒステリー起こしちゃうんじゃない？
しょうがないじゃない。そうよ。しょうがないわよ。泊まっていきましょう。
Aki was in agreement with Keiko. I was overhearing this whole exchange without even meaning to. In the end, the girls decided to stay. They immediately started passing the buck over to who would call their office. She's already too smart for her own good with that window strain trick. That window strain trick is the most basic trick that you could possibly imagine. Literally anyone could have come up with it. That ain't the level of anybody who's gonna be getting away with more than one murder. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Kobayashi start heading upstairs as if he'd just remembered something.
かなちゃん課長のお気に入りだし、かなちゃんがいいよ。
お気に入りだなんて嘘よ。秋の方がいいんじゃない？この間お尻触られたって言ってたし。
嘘、セクハラじゃん。そう、セクハラセクハラ。
No after you, Alphonse. No after you, Gaston. No after you, Alphonse. No after you, Gaston. Apparently the ghost conversations gave me a headache if I listened to them for too long. As I glanced over at Mari, wondering if I could manage to get some alone time with her, Kobayashi came back downstairs, shaking his head. SMH.
どうかしたんですか？
いや、お客さんがね、起きてこないんだ。いないのかもしれない。
Maybe he flew the coop.
田中とかいう人ですか？
Kobayashi nodded.
もうそろそろ10時になるし、あれだけノックすれば聞こえないはずないからね。
Unless he's dead. Dum 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 dum.
鍵はかけてあるんですか？
かかってる。でも合鍵があるからね。開けようかどうしようか迷ってるところなんだ。転んだか何かして頭でも打ってたら大変だし。
電話はないんですね。
None of the rooms at Spur Lodge had a telephone. It was Kobayashi's firm belief that guests shouldn't mix business and pleasure. Four, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I thought you said it was already 10, you liar. You fool. You dishonest traitor. It was 10 a.m. As usual, my watch was 5 minutes slow. It showed 9:55 a.m. Once the cuckoo stopped calling, Kobayashi turned to me.
一緒についてきてもらえないかな。一人でお客さんの部屋に入るのはまずいから。
いいですよ。
And the three of us, Mari tagged along naturally, headed upstairs to the bedrooms. Dunk dunk dunk. Dunk dunk dunk. We shouted enough to knock his door. Kobayashi knocked again, just to be sure.
田中さん、 いらっしゃいますか？
We listened for several seconds, but there was no response. Seeming to have finally given up, Kobayashi pulled out a bunch of keys and undid the lock. Then he opened the door and poked his head inside.
田中さん、
I saw Kobayashi's body stiffen.
おじさん、どうかしたの？
Mari asked from behind him. Kobayashi didn't answer, but gently pushed open the door and crept inside. He almost seemed to be sneaking.
何この匂い。
Oh man, look, she who smelt it dealt it, Mari. You know that. Mari grimaced as she covered her nose and mouth. It was a revolting odor. An odor rebelling against the system. Like a stagnant tidal pool, or rusty iron, maybe? Wait, was this the smell of...
なんてこった。
Kobayashi gasped. Hearing this, Mario quickly joined him inside. The room was identical to my own. A bathroom on the left as you entered, and two twin beds lined up next to each other. It had a TV and a VCR, just like my room. Oh hey, they let him keep his face this time, that's neat. He's not getting stepped on. Tanaka was lying on the bed nearest the window. Or what used to be Tanaka, I should say. First I thought the beds in this room had unusually colorful sheets. But I quickly realized how wrong I was. There was no way Kobayashi would use such garish red linens. The bed sheet, top sheet, pillow and blanket were all soaked in the same dark crimson liquid. Appear to be multiple wounds. I see two cuts in his shirt over here and over here. Is there a, nope. No, I was checking to see. Alright, you son of a bitch, don't you do this to me. There should be a choice here somewhere. God damn it.
どれ？
There should be a choice in here somewhere. Just let us pull this. Oh, god damn it. Oh, for the love of Christ. We didn't even skip that. I hate video games. They're bad and no one should play them. Yeah, Tanaka was dead. The bloodiest one by far was the gaping wound in his throat. Oh, and they didn't bother trying too. Alright, god damn it. You want to play it like this. No, it's like this is just like really basic VN stuff. There should be like a hotkey you can press to make the text box like go away. So you can actually look at the CG. And if we look around a bit more... Here we are. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything on his throat, game. Which means you could probably just ignore this. The important thing is that he was, in fact, murdered. Alright, let's head on over to the present.
喉がパックリと切れ。あれ？
わか僕どうか
いや、
田中
も もう
鍵を
かかっ
電
They're
話
there yet? They're there yet?
一緒
いいですよ。
田中
おじ
Tanaka was super dead. How dead was he? Very dead. The bedsheet, top sheet, pillow, and blanket were all soaked in the same dark crimson liquid. Spacebar. No spacebar is advance. There was no doubt about it. This was Naka's blood. Shift isn't it either. Tanaka had cuts all over his body. The bloodiest one by far was the gaping wound in his throat. I'd almost thought there was a second mouth opening there on his neck. At least it isn't Chris's blood. I wonder if Tanaka suffered like G did. Mari screamed and ran from the room. I was dimly aware of her flight, but I couldn't bring myself to follow her. Nor could I take my eyes off Tanaka's body.
Kamaitachi.
Kobayashi muttered this to himself, his face a ghastly white. He didn't respond. There was a noise behind me and I turned to see several people peering in through the doorway. It seemed they'd heard Mari's cry and come running.
Kyoko! そこにいるか?
Kobayashi called for his wife as he stood staring at the corpse.
何があったの？
Kyoko replied from the doorway. Kobayashi turned to his wife and began speaking to her slowly.
警察に電話しなさい。泊まり客が死んでいると。
When the lights went out, the questions who left the room during everyone's confusion. You mentioned that Kayama didn't say anything, but looking back, I'm pretty sure nobody spoke during that sequence except Mari and Kobayashi briefly. Kobayashi started to light a candle while Aki complained about the TV. I was glued to Toru. I mean, given how many defensive wounds the victim has, I wonder if anyone could have actually committed the murder that quickly. Someone screamed at some point. His face was illuminated by flickering candlelight. Wait, didn't the murder take place overnight? Wouldn't that have been way less risky? Question is why. I heard someone stifle a scream.
さあ、トール君、出よう。
Kobayashi put his hand on my back and started to guide me out of the room. I gulped before speaking. It was like swallowing a stone.
本当に死んでるのか確かめた方がいいんじゃないですか。
Kobayashi turned to me in shock.
一目瞭然じゃないか。あれだけ大量の血を流して。
Words failed him after that. But I kept at it.
温かいか冷たいか分かればいつ頃殺されたのか分かるかもしれませんよ。
In hindsight, it was an incredibly callous thing to say at the scene of such a gruesome crime.
私たちの仕事じゃない。何もせずにおこう。
When we were out of the room, Kobayashi locked the door once more. Then we headed down to the lounge, ushering along the others who'd gathered in the hallway. It wasn't such, didn't she bring tea? The question of the hour is like just how much darkness we really needed here. Cause like, Kobayashi did run off, bring some candle, like it turned on a flashlight very quickly, then ran off, got some candles. The question is which of those options would have spoiled everything.
あなた
Kyoko called out to her husband from the front desk. She held the phone receiver in her hand. Her face had gone pale.
電話が通じないの。
The phone has also died. Truly the most tragic tragedy of this tragic event. The poor bastard.
なんだって。
Kobayashi took hold of the receiver and started jiggling the hook.
本当だ。電話線が切れてるみたいだ。部屋の電話は
Perhaps there was a separate telephone in the couple's bedroom?
同じよ。あっちも何も聞こえないの。
Kyoko shook her head. Our eyes were all on Kobayashi. So when his gaze slowly turned towards the window, ours followed suit. If one of the Kaimas left the room to commit murder, the other would notice it, as I assume they would be sitting next to each other. By that logic, I don't think anyone could have left the room. I think would have known as Toshio immediately left the room during the darkness. Honestly, I think it's more likely that the Kaimas wouldn't have noticed each other than Toshio would have failed to notice Midori. We all saw how he reacted when she got in trouble last time.
ふもとまで降りるのは明日にならないと無理だな。
近くに電話を借りられるところはないんですか？
I asked Kobayashi this.
車さえ動けばいいんだが、この吹雪の中を歩くとなると。
Kobayashi's words trailed off as he gave a discouraged shake of his head. Besides, if the phone lines were down because of snow or something like that, the whole area might be out of service. Kayama, who'd been listening to our conversation anxiously, gave a sudden shout.
携帯電話があるんや。ちょっと待っててな。
A mobile phone. At that, it wouldn't matter if the lines were down. But Kobayashi stopped Kayama just as he was getting ready to head up to his room.
無駄ですよ。電波状況が悪いんでね。この辺りは携帯電話も入らないんです。
やだ、会社に電話しなきゃならないのに。
It was Kaneko who said that. Naturally. You can read the text boxes, you know what's what. Everyone went silent for a while.
今日一日あのまま放っておくしかないの。
Mari shuddered. Perhaps she was remembering her brief glimpse of the corpse in Tuka's room. I forced the macabre image from my mind.
それより問題は誰があの人を殺したのかってことじゃないのかな。その犯人はまだこの辺りにいるかもしれないんだから。
The culprit could be someone in this room. Everyone gasped and looked at the other people in the room. As if they'd all begun to suspect one another. I quickly tried to soften my statement.
いや、僕が言ったのは犯人はまだそんなに遠くには逃げてないんじゃないかってことで。
As I said this, however, I realized I didn't sound very convincing. Everyone in the lodge was gathered here, and it was hard to imagine that an outsider could have snuck out here in the middle of a blizzard, murdered Tanaka, then snuck away again. In which case, was the killer one of the people in this room? Horrified, I looked at each person in turn. Kobayashi seemed overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. His wife was looking at him with obvious concern. The two part-timers were mostly just watching things unfold from the sidelines. The three girls were huddled close together, trembling in fear. Kayama was holding his wife's hand reassuringly, but she actually looked slightly annoyed. And then there was Mary. She was pale and trembling, gripping my elbow tightly with both hands. Everyone seemed shocked, confused, or afraid in their own particular way. Could one of these people really be the killer? No, I couldn't bring myself to believe that.
小林さん、戸締まりを確認した方がいいんじゃないですか。誰かが侵入した形跡がないかどうか。
Now, Toru, denial ain't just a river in Egypt, but you shouldn't be getting your feet wet in this weather anyway. As I said this, Kobayashi's face brightened slightly.
そうだな。それはやっておいた方が良さそうだ。じゃあ、トール君と加山さん、それにトシオ君、一緒に来てもらえますか。
Apparently, it would be just the men checking things out. He nodded solemnly. Maybe no one broke in, but rather someone was already inside. That still raises the question of how somebody could have gotten in. One person unaccounted for was Jenny. Alright, you're just doing this again.
よし。今日はみどりちゃんと一緒にみんなに飲み物でも作っておいてくれたらいいだろう。
Mari whispered to me as we were getting ready to leave.
気をつけてね。
We moved around the lodge as a group, checking all the doors and windows. First the downstairs, then the upstairs. Though I didn't want to, we had to go back inside the murder room. Kayama and Toshio, who'd seemed slightly curious before entering, quickly went pale. Must have been much worse than they'd imagined. Toshio gagged and brought a hand to his mouth, doing his best not to vomit. I tried not to look at the body, but there was no avoiding the stench. It was even worse than before. Felt my stomach turn. The room's window was still locked, and unbroken this time. And besides, if someone had come in from that blizzard, there'd be wet footprints on the floor. Yet there were none to be seen. I suddenly cried out.
乾燥室を忘れてますよ。
There was an essential element to ski lodges such as this. And that was the drying room. Skis and snow-covered boots and the like. You couldn't bring those sorts of things inside the lodge. So you'd come inside via the attached drying room, take off your boots, and set your skis on the rack to dry. That's basic ski lodge etiquette, now you know, and knowing is half the battle. Kamaitachi. Then you could safely go inside without tracking any melting snow behind you. If Tanaka's killer was an outsider, then the drawing room was the only logical entry point. We hurried down to the room in question. There's no lock on the door here. That's why we passed it by without checking it earlier. As we entered, I saw everyone's skis and boots, neatly arranged against the wall. None of them had so much as a drop of water on them, much less actual snow. The floor by the door leading outside was completely dry. That door had a lock on it and it appeared to still be secured.
ダメだ。やっぱりここからも入れない。どこからも誰も出入りなんかしていないんだ。
Man, you can't really wipe footprints off of just... If the footprint's wet, you can't really just wipe them up off of anything, really. So, our man isn't an outsider. Kobayashi shook his head. He seemed to understand the ramifications of what he'd just said. The killer was still in the building. We walked back to the lounge in grim silence. The women, who had been quietly nursing their coffees, looked at us expectantly. When we failed to respond, Midori anxiously put down her coffee cup.
それでどうだったの？
It's a sitch. Well, the sitch is that there's a crazy murderer somewhere inside the building as we speak. Midori, having regained some measure of composure, looked at me for an explanation. But it was Kobayashi who answered.
誰かが出入りした様子はなかった。
The room was silent for a while as everyone processed those words. Cue Widow's dial-up tone. Kobayashi then turned to his wife.
それで電話はまだ繋がらないのか？
ええ、ダメみたい。
It couldn't possibly be that easy. Kaneko suddenly began to cry. Aki and Keiko cried, consoling their friend from either side, but they both seemed on the verge of tears themselves. Midori gave Kobayashi a look.
かまいたちにやられたって本当なんですか？
We were stunned by the abrupt question, but the women just stared at us, waiting for an answer. Apparently Mari had told them about the condition of Tanaka's body. Only now did I understand the meaning of Kobayashi's whispered Kamaitachi when we'd first entered the room. The manner of Tanaka's death was exactly the same as in Mari's ghost story. Kobayashi tried to laugh it off, but he didn't seem to be having much success.
誰がそんなことをバカバカしい。そりゃ確かにひどい様子だったよ。でも人間がやったに決まってる。人の皮をかぶった獣みたいなやつだったとしても、かまいたちなんかいるわけがないだろう。
A beast in human skin, loyally serving his masters at the Titans.
じゃあ一体誰なんですか？
I think it was... What if this had is Kobayashi and Otome winds up getting vindicated for having accused him all that time yesterday.
私にはわからない。警察に調べてもらわないと。
そんなこと言ったって警察なんか来ないじゃない。
Don't put your faith in the police. What the hell is wrong, Will?
明日になればなんとかなる。それまでの辛抱だよ。
それまで人殺しと一緒にいろっていうの？
And Midori's cry. When the Midoris may cry, everyone looked around at the room, at each other once more. I hadn't expected such hysterics out of her. But given the circumstances, I supposed it was inevitable. None of the people in this room looked like they'd harm a fly. One of them was responsible for slitting Tanaka's throat. That's right. One of these people was merely pretending to be shocked as they sipped their coffee alongside everyone else. Can you imagine? Look at that bastard, drinking coffee like he owns the place. Couldn't believe it. Toshio opened his mouth to speak.
でもあの人、一体誰だったんですか？ここにいる誰か、あの人のことを知ってた人いるんですかね？
That was the crucial question. The most important question facing America today. Tanaka had seemed a total stranger to the people gathered here. No one should have a reason to kill him. I certainly didn't.
宿帳には東京世田谷の田中一郎と書いてある。でもスキーをしに来たわけでもなさそうだし、妙だとは思ってた。
Ichiro Tanaka from Setagaya, Tokyo. Kobayashi thought back.
なんだか偽名臭いな。
I had finally figured it out this time. Toshio had a point. Ichiro Tanaka was a common name here as John Smith was in America. Not to mention those sunglasses of his. So what the hell was he doing here at this lodge?
あの人、なんでこのペンションを選んだんでしょう。以前に泊まったとか、友達の紹介とか、そういうんじゃないんですか。
Did that look like the sort of guy who has friends to you, Toru?
いや、何も言ってなかった。
何泊の予定だったんです。
2泊したいと言ってた。
2 nights. Enough for a chess game at the very least. Kayama interrupted, sounding peeved.
なあ、小林君、もう一遍あの部屋行って、あの人の持ち物調べてみいひんか。なんかわかるかもしれへんで。
Yeah, let's look at his stuff. He's not gonna need it anymore.
しかしそれは警察が来るまであのままにしておかないと。
Honestly, by the time the police actually get here, the evidence that you're worried about is probably going to have decayed into non-existence anyway.
そんなこと言うたってな。あの死体がてこのまま暖房効いた中置いとったら腐りよるで。
A bloody corpse starting to decay. And the thought was enough to turn my stomach.
あそこだけ暖房を切ることができないんですか。
集中システムだから無理なんだ。
Are we going to dump his body outside? That would probably be even worse, honestly. There isn't really any way to totally stop a body from decaying. Tossing it out in a blizzard like that would probably just get him buffeted and freezer burned. I figured as much. I hadn't seen thermostats in any of the rooms, so Kobayashi can't yell at me for touching the thermostat. If you turned off the heat for the whole lodge, we'd all freeze to death. And if we did, the putrid sense of decay would soon begin to fill the air. Yeah, me too. As Kaneko started to wail, the other girls broke into sobs as well. Once heard of the Egyptian method of keeping bodies decaying, thinking about milk and other stuff. I mean, a lot of it involved pulling, like, organs out of the person's body so there wouldn't be, like, a lot of innards to do decaying and rotting and attract flies. Yeah, you pull people's bits out through their nose with a hook. It's horrifying. I placed my hand over Mari's. As if that small act had triggered something, Mari began to speak.
例えば犯人は昨べ戸締まりが完全になる前に入り込んでいたとは考えられないのかしら。
I was read up on a lot of messed up things. Look, I gotta know how bodies work. It is, in fact, my actual job. Kobayashi nodded. You imagine a forensic scientist who doesn't even know how bodies work after they're dead? Be shameful.
なるほど。それだと鍵をこじ開けたりする必要はないわけだ。でも出ていくときにはどうやって鍵をかけるんだね。
I mean, you don't keep the key behind a lock, do you, once they were inside? It wouldn't matter a hill of beans.
出て行ってないかもしれな
Assuming
いじゃ
there
な
was
い
an
の。
opportunity when they could sneak over. Right, that too. Sorry, I just assumed automatically. Kobayashi gasped. The killer hadn't left? I mean, they were still in the lodge? Mari continued on.
車が動かせるようになってから逃げ出すつもりなのかもしれないわ。
We naturally all looked up at the ceiling, up towards the murder room. Was the killer still in there? Earlier, we'd only made a quick sweep of the locks. I wouldn't be surprised to find out the criminal was still hidden somewhere in that room. I was more willing to believe that than to admit one of the people sitting here might be a murderer. I said the first thing that came into my head. Blocked for civil,
もしそうだ
Loki.
としたらそいつは僕たちが警察に連絡するのを できるだけ遅らせようとするんじゃないかな。
You know who's really bad at calling the police? Dead people. Yes, you could call the entire second floor the murder floor. The amount of people murdered up there is impressive. I mean, I guess you kind of have a point. But also, they got Kayama and both the Kobayashis down on the first floor. Toshio. Mrs. Kayama went down the flight of stairs, which is kind of an in-between state. Don't neglect the bottom floor either, is what I'm saying.
どういう意味？
口を封じようとするかもしれない。
Killer might want to yell at us. Eh, shut up, will ya? It's very rude.
まさか私たちみんなを殺すっていうの？
Stabbing the peoples is very rude, don't you know? It's very slightly illegal too, but you know. One problem at a time.
そこまではしないかもしれないけど、例えば電話線を切るとか。
The notion hadn't occurred until I was actually saying it. Mari's eyes went wide.
まさか
Toshio suddenly grew animated.
調べた方がいいですよ。もし本当に誰かが切ったのなら、つなげて連絡だってできるし。
That's not animation game. Don't you lie to me, you fool. Kayama stood as well.
ちょっと待ちいな。今の話がほんまやったら、電話より人殺しの方が問題やないか。見つけて捕まえるんや。
どんな凶暴なやつかわからないんですよ。下手に手を出さない方が賢明です。それより警察ですよ。
アホやな。たとえ電話が通じたとしてもや、この天気で警察がどないしてくんねん。それより犯人や。捕まえてしもたら、一晩でも二晩でも安心して眠れるっちゅうもんや。
Imagining the people coming back to life to yell at the people screaming because their screams literally letting them rest in peace. I mean, honestly, who does rest in peace? I can't even rest for like 8 hours at a time. They both had fair points, but Kayama seemed to have the upper hand.
とりあえず中を捜索するのが先でしょう。そうでないとおちおち一人でトイレにも行けないってことになりますよ。
I mean, nobody here goes to the bathroom by themselves anyway. Bodo appears to not even need to pee at all. It's incredible. Toshio seemed unhappy about this.
でも、誰の目にも止まらずに誰かが入り込むなんて考えられないんだけどな。
He has an incredibly good point, you gotta admit.
それじゃあ敏夫さんはこの中の誰かが犯人だっておっしゃるんですか？
いや、そういうわけじゃ。
It was Kobayashi who finally settled the debate.
よし、とにかく捜索はしておいた方がいいだろう。不意打ちを食らうのだけは避けたいからな。
Alright, let's split up, gang. This morning Toto had coffee and nothing else. I mean, that's pretty normal for me. I don't know what you're talking about. Kobayashi suggested the 4 men handle the search, same as before. In different circumstances, Mari might have complained about this being sexist. But right now, she remained silent. It was, in fact, very sexist, though. Let's not mince words here. First the kitchen, then the dining room. And after that... the world! No. Checked under the tables and even inside the fridge. We found the Green Lantern's girlfriend there, but that didn't help us. Behind the front desk and in the bathroom storage cubby. Over the river and through the woods. We rechecked the drawing room, but there was no place for someone to hide in there. We were given access to the Kobayashi's own quarters, and those of the staff, but there were no signs of anyone. We proceeded upstairs. We'd already been through the guest room earlier, so we just took a quick look under the beds and in the closets. There's no one there, of course.
あとは死体の部屋だけですね。
Yes, the crimes room where all the crimes happen.
まさかあそこにずっと
Just sitting there looking at the body. I mean, I can imagine worse ways to spend an afternoon.
けど
I can imagine better ways, don't get me wrong, but...
窓かて閉まっとった。おかしいやないか。
Kayama underscored just how curious the situation was.
犯人は一体どっから出たんや。
We stood and stared at the door to Tanaka's room.
じゃあやっぱりまだこの中に
Alright, so was the window locked? Because that would make this one an actual locked room murder. Still not sure how secure the keys are, so I'm not sure, like, how difficult it is, but hey, I appreciate a good lock. As I said this, I imagined a man lurking just behind the door, a large straight razor in his hand, wearing a hockey mask over a Michael Myers mask. The moment we entered, there'd be a flash of silver light, then blood would come spurting from someone's throat. Impossible. There was no way such a ridiculous thing could happen. That meant I'd have to explain how the killer could have escaped from the locked room. Or was it better to think of Tanaka as having his throat slashed by a Kamaitachi? One born from a woman's dying, just like in Mari's ghost story. God, I need to move that hand. That thumb is just, ow, God, ow. It's in my eyes. Ah. 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 Anyway, crime.
バカバカしい。いつまでもこんなとこにじっとしているわけはない。きっとすぐに外へ出ただろう。
でもドアの鍵は
Kamayashi gave a snorting laugh.
何言ってるんだ。ここの鍵は中のボタンを押しておけば自動的にロックされるだろうが。
Never right auto locks. How boring. I'm no longer invested. The rest of us said, "Oh," in unison. Oh, that explains it. For a second there, I thought there was something to be concerned about. I took a second to regain my composure, then spoke.
でも何にしろこの部屋が最後なんですからね。ここに誰も隠れていなかったら。
Not hiding in here, then.
分かってる。犯人は私たちのうちの誰かだってことを認めなくちゃならない。
No, they could just be in the closet. With Jenny, or possibly being Jenny. Kobayashi said this solemnly as he slid the room key in the lock.
いいかい。開けるよ。
Chunk. I heard someone gulp. We readied ourselves, and Kobayashi pulled open the door. It was deathly quiet inside. The scent of blood in the air was suffocating. Toshio took the first tentative steps forward. Once we might have entered this room casually. It felt strange to not be creeping into it this way, but we had little choice in the matter. There was a closet to our left, and a bathroom to our right. Two places where someone could hide immediately as we entered. But the bathroom door suddenly burst open, and the killer jumped out at us and went, "Ooga booga 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 booga." We didn't have any weapons. Toshio motioned towards the closet with his eyes. We split up. 2 people on each side of the closet. Then Toshio reached out and opened the curtain on the count of 3. There was nothing inside except a coat with a fleece-lined collar swinging there on its hanger. I heard someone give a sigh of relief. Next to the bathroom. The 4 of us turned around, and this time I was the one with my hand on the doorknob. Once everyone nodded that they were ready, I yanked open the door as hard as I could. And then springing out at us came... nothing. I pulled aside the shower curtain, but there was no one hiding in the bathtub. The cream-colored ceramic sink was dotted with specks of red, however. And the killer washed up here? That didn't happen last time because obviously there hadn't actually been a murder in here last time, as we all know. I think they did replay the sink slightly. The sink slightly. That's a nice little touch. Anyway, let's see if there's a monster under the bed. Kaima sounded unhappy about that. I couldn't imagine that anyone would willingly hide beneath a dead body, but Kobayashi diligently searched under the beds anyway. First, the one closest to the door. Then the one with Tanaka on it. I hadn't intended to look, but once my gaze fell upon his corpse, I couldn't pull my eyes away from it. I found my attention suddenly drawn to Tanaka's left hand, which remained largely unbloodied. There was a watch on his wrist. I approached the body, thinking that if the watch had been broken during the murder, we might be able to determine the exact moment of the crime. Unfortunately, it turned out not to be the case. Tanaka's digital watch, which looked much more expensive than my own, was still in perfect working order. 11:16 a.m. You can't trust a broken watch at a crime scene either, although knowing who does have an alibi for the moment the watch was broken can always be helpful in narrowing suspects down. I reflexively looked at my watch. 11:16 a.m. Across the room, the VR's display blinked 11:05 a.m. What was up with these clocks? What's the deal with timepieces?
加山さん、今何時ですか？
ん ?11 時5分や。
Someone had killed Mr. Tanaka, yet the towel served in the tub were clean and unused. Where would the killer wash up after killing him and cutting his body parts? I mean, that is exactly what I was trying to convey when I kept looking at the bathtub. There's no blood on the floor or on the bed or anywhere other than just directly on the corpse parts. If there's nothing in the sink and there's nothing in the tub, then where did the murder take place? Kaima looked down at his watch as he said this. Something about this whole time business has been bugging me since the moment I woke up this morning. I mean, honestly, how do you know time is really passing? I don't feel like time's passing. Maybe it's all some kind of big whacked out conspiracy, huh? But I decided not to worry about it for now.
さあ、もう出よう。誰も隠れちゃいないよ。
I followed Kobayashi out of the room. Something was still nagging at me, but I couldn't quite figure out what. Thank you for the hydrate, Redeem. My throat was starting to dry out. We returned to the lounge with mixed emotions. You know what? When they said question arc at the beginning, I thought maybe we could go until the end of the question arc, and then it would provide us a decent stopping point. But if they're gonna keep going this long... A killer Amogus? I don't know if there's a better stopping point than here. Y'all will have most of a week to chew over the case. we all wait to see what comes next. We have been going for a while. Yes, thank you for your understanding. Please enjoy the benefit of thinking about this new case on your own and why. I hope your voice will be fine. Oh, this is fine. I feel fine. I could keep going if it weren't, like, for my body's need for sustenance and shit. Anyways, the case may be, we're going to be rating Dr. Zander Turing, a fellow scientist VTuber, who's currently playing Pokemon Black and White 2. Please treat our new doctor with all the grace and dignity of the all. If you'd like, please feel free to just call him Doctor and be really obnoxious and confusing the whole time. I think that would be very funny. But until then, I'm going to click away from the window before this ticking noise drives me insane. I will see all of you next time. Fare thee well.